everyone. I'm Jennifer Lee, lead admin evangelist here at Salesforce. And taking a look at the chat, I see people attending from Seattle, Canada, Michigan, New York, Charlotte, Germany. Wow. Well, thanks for joining us. And welcome to our October Automate This episode. This is a monthly series showcasing trailblazers like you doing some amazing things with automation. So the best way to be notified when we live stream is to set a reminder on the live stream episode page. And then you'll get an email reminder the day of an event. And to interact with us during the live stream, post your comments in the chat, as some of you are already doing. And to interact and engage with me and my guest presenters, start your question with a Q:, so we can quickly scan through and identify the questions for the Q&A section at towards the end. So let's take a look at what you're going to learn in today's episode from our two guest presenters. Here are 3 things that you will learn from Kenya: how to use Flow to manage paying off your debt, and learn the differences between an assignment and update elements, and how to be comfortable with collection elements. Now, the 3 things you'll learn from Mary is how to build a screen flow that can create blood pressure records, learn how to configure a custom toast prompt, and learn how to use Flow to send custom notifications to desktop and mobile, and then redirect the users to the triggering record. So, as admins, we build automation for our companies to increase productivity. Today, we're going to show you how these 2 ladies use Salesforce and specifically Flow for their own personal use. I'm excited to be joined by Kenya Shakir and Salesforce MVP and Golden Hoodie recipient Mary Tagler. So Kenya will show us how she used Salesforce to manage her finances, and Mary will show us how she uses Salesforce to track her blood pressure. Welcome, Kenya and Mary, to Automate This.
Hi, Jen.
Hey, Jen.
Hey, so Kenya, this is your first time on Automate This, so welcome. How long have you been creating flows, and how did you get started on your flow journey?
Absolutely. So I've been creating flows for about 2 years now. I've been an admin for about 2 years now. So I inherited a lot of process builders and workflows, but from the ground up, I've only built flows. And to get started, I just generate a lot of ideas in my mind about how I would like to work easier and smarter. And then I'm like, let's see if Flow can do that for me.
Love that. And what cool automation solutions have you built?
This one, I've definitely got an automation solution for like a capsule closet that I'm building in my own dev org. So, and then of course, flows for work as well.
Great. And what advice do you have for people who are starting to learn flow?
Absolutely. First things first, like don't be afraid. Use something that you can use as a guide to help you feel comfortable, whether that's a YouTube video, badges on Trailhead or like a super badge, or even like going to a community event and doing a demo. So the very first time I ever built a flow was at Florida Dreamin' during a walkthrough presentation. So pretty much find a buddy, find something that can help you and make it feel less scary.
Great. Thanks for sharing. Hey, Mary.
Hi.
So I know you're a longtime Flownatic. How did you get started with your flow journey?
I got started before the current Flow interface when it was a lot harder to learn Flow. There weren't as many
Hmm.
resources out there. And a lot of it was really trial and error and asking a lot of questions in the community and trying to build things that I heard about in the community and even building things in my own dev org to really see if I could do it and test my skill set.
Great. And what's your favorite flow feature and why?
Oh, that's a tough one. I like so many features of Flow, but I think what I really like is the ability to create screen flows to lead users through an experience and really tailor it for their needs.
And what cool automation solutions have you built?
Oh, I've built a bunch of really cool things both for work and for personal life. For work, I've built a lot of flows that help create efficiencies, a lot of things that will send notifications at specific times that will allow the user to interact and minimize their manual inputs. In my personal life, I've built a lot of really cool things that like the blood pressure tracker that really enhance just overall quality of life and make things easier to keep track of generally.
Great. All right, we're back with Kenya. So I'm always looking for new trailblazers to showcase their skills, and I reached out to you after reading your post on LinkedIn about this flow that you created. So can you share with us more about this solution with our audience?
Absolutely. I can show you better than I can tell you. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, and let me know when you can see it.
Yep, we can see it.
Perfect. So I created this whole custom application to manage money and also debt overall. The custom object we'll be looking at today is the debt object. And so this is just a list view of all the different debts that a person may have, some test data right here. And then this is a detailed view of a debt record. So whatever, it could be a credit card name, a loan, whatever the balance is, what's your minimum monthly payment, and so on and so forth. And then what we'll be focusing on today is identifying which of the debt records has the highest balance. Going back to our list view, we can see right now this Wells Fargo one at $6,100 is the highest balance. But we're going to use Flow to change that today. And the reason that you indicate highest balance when it comes to paying off your debt is there is one particular debt payoff method, in which you figure out which one is the highest balance and focus that one to pay it off as soon as possible before going on to the other debt records. So we are going to change our balance on our city simplicity record. Let's just do 6,200 because we know for a fact that that's bigger than 6,100. And then while that's doing that in the background, or that flow is moving in the background, I can show you specifically what's going on. So we're starting the flow with a record. It must be triggered by a record change. And if we were to go into this start, it's whenever the record is created or updated. So we just updated that debt record, and the flow is going to run. But if I were to create a new debt record where the balance was 6,300, I would want the flow to run as well. And then after we've started it, we want to find all of our debt records. And I know that the flow was kind of like, do you really need this element? And we do need this element because I need to be able to bring all of my debt records together in order to figure out which one has the highest balance. So we're bringing in all of our debt records through this get records element. I want to store all the records. And then the fields that I want to store, I'm going to put it in a record collection variable, and I'm going to store the highest balance checkbox as well as the balance amount and the name of the debt. And then some of my favorite elements, collection filters. So once we've stored all of our debt records into that record collection variable, we want to filter out which of the records in there have the checkbox checked for highest balance. There should only be one. But in creating this flow, one of the issues that I ran into is that there were multiple records that were being checked for true as being the highest balance. And so I think that get record element here is what really helped. The loop that we're going to get into really helped to make sure it was only one at a time. So just to reiterate, we're going to the collection filter and we're filtering out only the records where highest balance equals true. After we filter them out, we're going to want to loop through these records. Again, there should only be one, but let's just say there were two. So for each of the records, we're going to bring them into this loop. And you can see the title of that loop is we're making sure we're unchecking the highest balance equals true. So we want it to be false now. And we have to assign those. Before we can update, we have to assign what we want it to be. So for the current record that's in the loop, we're going to make their highest balance checkbox equals false. And then we're just going to store in this next assignment element, we are going to store what was the name of, or what was the record ID of that record. And we're going to be using that in a quick second when we get to the update element. So we've gone through, each record has gone through the loop. We've unchecked the highest balance box and we have their record ID. And then with those variables, we can go ahead into the update records element and make sure using the IDs from the loop and making sure that we update those to be highest balance equals false. So now, in essence, all of our debt records, none of them should be indicated as the highest balance, which is great. Another collection element, we're going to do a collection sort. Again, we're sorting through all of the debt records that we brought in through that get record element, and we're going to sort our balance in a descending order, starting with the highest balance. And I only want to keep that one record with the highest balance. And then we're going to go through another loop. So this is our second and our last loop in the flow. And in this loop, we are making sure that we do check the record that does have the highest balance. Using, again, two assignment elements. So we're assigning highest balance equals true. And then we are capturing that record ID of the record that is going through this loop. It should be one. And then after that, our very last element was our update record element, using what we use in our assignment elements as well as that record ID from our second loop. And we'll know that that is a record where we need to mark highest balance equals true. And that's the end of the flow. And if we go back to our City Simplicity record, you can see a highest balance is checked. And if we were to refresh that list view with all of our debts, what will we see? Oh, yes, we will see that the $6,200 balance is again marked as the highest balance. So when I go in to say, like, which debt record should I be focusing on this month or this 3 months, I'm going to know it's this City Simplicity card. And that is my flow.
That was awesome. Thank you, Kenya. All right. So
Yeah.
I love trailblazers who use Salesforce in their personal lives. What other things have you done personally with Salesforce?
Yes, so I talked a little bit earlier about my capsule closet. I've been wanting to recreate my wardrobe now that I kind of know exactly what I like to wear. And so I use Salesforce to track one, all the items that I already have in my wardrobe, as well as the items that I am still needing. And I use that, I like prioritize it by like high, medium, low, and like what season it's for. And I use that as kind of like a shopping list so that when I go to any store, I'm not just, willy nilly buying. I know exactly what item that I need because it's in Salesforce.
Love that.
Mhm.
We're going to have to bring you back to show that example too. All right. So, hello again, Mary. And I know
Hi.
you have several personal use cases for Flow. Can you share with us one use case today and its solution?
Sure. So today I'm going to talk about the blood pressure tracker that I built. I built the blood pressure tracker because during COVID, I actually found out I had high blood pressure, and it became important that I was checking my blood pressure regularly and also could report back to my doctor about what those blood pressure readings looked like so we could determine how well controlled my blood pressure was. I knew that I wouldn't remember to do this on my own and thought, how can I track this effectively in a way that worked for me? And one of the things that was really important was to ensure that my data was also kept private. So what I decided to do was build it out in a Salesforce development org and customize it with Flow, and that's what I'm going to show you today. So let me share my screen, Jen. So we'll start out on my home page. I embedded my ScreenFlow on the home page, and this is the entry point for my blood pressure. I can enter it here or I can enter it on the mobile app. I have a few pieces of information available to me up front. I can see what my last reading was. I can also see the color code. Now, the American Heart Association has a red to green color code about the level of your blood pressure. I personally can never remember which reading falls in which category, so for me, having these visual indicators are super helpful. And then I have the date of my last blood pressure reading. This gives me context as to how long it's been since I've last taken a blood pressure reading. So I'm going to demo the whole user experience up first, and then we're going to get under the hood. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to enter the two data points required for a blood pressure reading. The systolic number, which is the top number in your reading, and the diastolic number, which is the second number in your reading. So I'm going to go ahead and input some numbers. And I'm going to hit next. Before I hit next, we have a flow field that I'll show you in a bit that defaults the reading date to the current date and time. Now I can change that as needed to the actual reading date if I forget to enter an entry, such as if I went to a doctor and maybe want to go back and put that in my record. Once I hit next, the record is created and I have a custom toast prompt that tells me the record was logged and it gives me a link to click back to that record. And here's what that record looks like from just a standard view. The user can also enter this way, but the flow is a very convenient way for them to do that with a lot of little bells and whistles attached on the back end that I'll show you in a minute. So the first thing I want to talk about is how I got that flow on the page. So the first thing I did was I modified my home page and I embedded my flow here. So I added the flow component. As long as my flow is active, I can tag the screen flow that I want. And that allows me to access, or any user, frankly, to access from that home page. The next thing I did was I created the fields on my custom object. This custom object only has a few fields needed to support this, the most complicated of which is the level field. The level field is that color indicator. It's a formula image field that matches the blood pressure reading to the color coding that the American Heart Association puts out. So you can see here I have a nested if statement with the various readings and what image should appear. So this first one is green, all the way down to red. Using all that configuration, I moved on to my screen flow. So let's talk about what that looks like. In our first step, we're getting all blood pressure records. We're doing that because we want to be able to see what the most recent reading is from that top element in our screen flow. So I'm grabbing my blood pressure objects, I'm sorting by the reading date, and I'm only keeping that first record. Next, I move on to my screen. At the top, I have some display text, that last reading, my elements that show what that reading was, the blood pressure level, and the last reading date. I'm going to briefly show you what that last reading date looks like, as it's a formula. Rather than pull in the full date and time, I instead used a formula variable. I like to start my formula variables with F for easy location, to change a date time field into strictly a date, and I put date value around that reading date. Moving back into the screen, again you see my systolic and diastolic fields as well as the reading date. They have the red asterisks because they are required. From there in my flow, we go down to create the blood pressure record. So we're creating the record, we're passing in the values from our screen flow, and we've created the new record. Once we do that, I am grabbing that new record again. And the reason I'm grabbing it is I need some information to support my custom toast field. So here again, the ID matches the blood pressure ID from the created record, and we're storing all of the fields. Moving on to the show toast action, here's where I can customize what I want the toast to look like. So here I've created the message, which is click the URL to access the record. The URL is a token for the link behind it, and we'll talk about that in a second. We've assigned a title to our blood pressure reading. We've determined the type of notification it is. And then here is where we have our URL label. We have a text template. I prefix all of those with the acronym TT. And we have another formula variable, which is our URL link. I'll pull both of those up for you. So first, in our text template, we're literally just showing in plain text the name of the record. And that was that BP dash and the number of the record, that auto number. In our URL, I actually used this component from unofficialsalesforce.com. I took the formula that is provided there and I append with the ID of that record. This is what supports redirecting the user to the record that was just created when they click on it. But I wasn't done there. I wanted to ensure that I had reminders, because if I take my blood pressure once, that's great. But if I'm not taking it with regularity, that's a problem. So what I did was I thought about creating a second flow. What I first did was I decided that I wanted to be notified in a couple of ways. The first way I wanted to be notified was through a custom notification type that was available both within the desktop app and the mobile app. So I created a notification type. Once I create it, I must go back in and choose my supported channels. And here I have selected desktop and mobile. Once I've done that, I saved my notification ID into a custom label. I created the custom label because as a best practice, we should try and reduce instances of hard coding IDs in our flow. I personally like to follow a naming convention where I first list the object or purpose of the label, and then I list a descriptor. So in this case, notification and BP for blood pressure. Moving on to my flow, I created two paths. I created an immediate path and a scheduled path. We're going to talk about the entry criteria and then the immediate path first. Our entry criteria is any time a record is created or updated. Within the criteria, we used formula entry criteria for the record to be new or for the reading date to be changed. So in those cases, my immediate flow will update the records. I opted to update the record in a separate flow instead of my screen flow because I wanted to ensure that whether a user created the new blood pressure record using Flow, or potentially just using the clone button or the new button from the object itself, this step would always be taken. So here I am setting a value called next reading due, and I'm setting it using a formula variable. So let's take a look. Our formula variable again starts with F, and here I've replicated what I saw in my image field, where I've defined the different levels for my blood pressure, and I've created recheck windows. So if my blood pressure falls within this first if statement, my reading date should be 10 days after, my next reading date should be 10 days after my current one, and so on. And it goes all the way down to the bottom where if my blood pressure is in the green range or undefined, it will automatically default to a 14-day cadence after I last took my blood pressure. So once I've done that, I wanted to create my notifications. I wanted it to notify me when it was time to recheck my blood pressure. So I created this second scheduled branch. When we look at the scheduled path, it is scheduled to run 0 minutes after our recheck due date. So let's look at what we've got. First, we assign the recipient ID. So we created a variable for both the recipient ID and the recipient email. We add the created by ID and we add the created by email to each so that we can use them in our flow. We use the send reminder action, send custom notification, which is a standard core action. We reference our notification. Again, we're referencing that custom label we created with $ label for the global variable and notification BP as the name of that label. We have our notification body, which we'll review in a minute using our text template. We've titled our notification and we've identified the recipient IDs. It's important to note here, the recipient IDs are a collection variable. Then we've identified where our user should be redirected when they get this notification. So let's go ahead and take a look at both our text template now and see what's under the hood. In our text template, we see here is what we're going to be prompted. Your blood pressure reading was X. Your last blood pressure reading was X. This will tell us then what the alert is. We also can look at these collection variables, both for recipient email. Again, it's just text. It allows multiple values. And for our recipient ID. And we create the collection variable because that's the type of variable that is supported by that particular action. The last thing I decided to do was to also set an email reminder, just in case I don't see the desktop or mobile notification. What I can do with that is I first created my email template, and I did that here with another text template. Here I'm saying my last blood pressure reading was, I insert the reading date, and I insert the reading level. Once I do that, I can use my reminder action. It's again that send email core action. So here I'm putting in the body of the email. I am specifying the recipient address collection. I am specifying the record ID it pertains to, and I'm denoting that this will be rich text body. And here is my subject of my email, time to recheck your blood pressure. As a result, if I go to my notifications in Salesforce and I click on a level, I can simply select it and it will take me to that specific record. And with that, I created a blood pressure tracker. Back to you, Jen.
Hard finding that unmute button. Well, thanks, Mary, for that. That's a really great tracking tool. And I know you've done some other cool things in your personal life. So can you tell us about that?
Sure. I like to use DevWorks for a lot of things. I organize moves, I plan my wedding, and one of the cool things I ended up not using but really wanted to test my flow skills with is I built a flow for RSVPs for my wedding. What I did was I had structured every account in my DevWork as a household. I then added the contacts that were our guests with a separate record type for our vendors, and I denoted on the record if they had a +1 or not. Then from the flow, I allowed the user to go through and say if they would be able to attend or not, indicate dietary preferences, update contact information such as email or physical address, and if they were bringing a +1, allow them to create that contact record by inputting it and then attaching it to the account that the original contact was linked to. That's
Wow.
probably one of the favorite ones I've built because I feel like it's really practical.
I'm pretty sure you could bundle that up and then like share it out to the community, and many people will just take that wedding app and use it themselves.
Probably. I'm guessing the non-sales half of their partners won't be as excited as the Salesforce half will be.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing.
Sure.
All right, so now we're going to transition to our Q&A section of this episode. So just a reminder to tag your questions with a Q colon so I can easily scan through and identify your question for our next segment. Be right back. All right. So while folks are thinking about the questions as it relates to what you saw Mary and Kenya show us, thank you for those who participated in the poll as to if you created an app for your own personal use, and 43% of you did. So that's pretty cool. So then our next question was, well, if you did, what types of things did you build? So three of you responded. I just want to give a shout out to Andrea. Andrea also built an app to help her plan her wedding. So I think the two of you collaborate together and we can have a wedding app for the Salesforce Ohana. Diane mentioned that she uses her DevOrg for job hunting and to keep track of applications, contacts, and things like that. So that's pretty cool. And Georgie mentioned that she uses an app to reference flows and Apex code that she's written. And so she doesn't have to go searching for it. And that's pretty cool as well. So, again, thanks, Andrea, Diane, and Jordy for sharing. So, we have a couple of questions here. Um, and the famous Mike Gerholt is on watching Automate This. Welcome, Mike. And his question is executives and stakeholders often ask for notifications, emails for everything. I think we've all been there. What, which leads to full inboxes and them not paying attention. What are some other options to emails to consider?
I would say pushing to Slack is a great way to reduce the number of emails that your users receive, and has been very successful in my work personally as a way to deflect the inbox and instead create it in a place where it can also be very collaborative.
I would say creating reports and dashboards that are more specific to the needs that they really want, and then subscribing to those reports as opposed to a multitude of emails that are kind of saying the same thing.
Yeah, I've been in a
Yeah.
similar situation where folks are like, "We want emails." I'm like, "Are you really sure you want emails?" And then we implement it and they're like, "We don't want the emails anymore. There's too much." And initially we're like, "Well, you could just do a list view and then you can go and see all the things that you need to do. Are you sure you want that email?" So yeah, there's multiple alternatives to flooding email boxes. So thanks.
Yeah, I like to negotiate if I can. If I can get them to agree to try something like Kenya said, a report subscription for a couple weeks, I'd much rather try that and see if we can stick with that versus an email on every occurrence.
Mm-hmm. All right. I have another question for Mike. It's his lucky day. So Mike says, I notice in your resources you have TT for text template, F for format variable. Very observant, Mike. What are some other naming best practices that you have?
For me personally, I'll use either V for variable, or if I feel like I'm going to be interchanging, I might use COL for a collection variable. That really help me quickly search for them. In particular, if it's a more complicated flow, I can put like an F in and it'll filter out anything that technically includes an F, but usually it'll group those items that start with an F very close together to make it easy for me to find what I want.
Any advice from you, Kenya?
No, I was watching like I definitely need to do that myself. Other than absolutely using the description field, I think has been really useful to better understand because a lot of times you do end up with elements that are the same, like the same name, because that just is what you're doing. So I like the naming conventions, Mary.
Thank you.
Yeah, for me, I would start variable with VAR, whatever it is. Again, to easily find the thing that you're looking for. And I totally agree with the descriptions. Like, even if you're a solo admin, I would recommend putting in descriptions because, you might be building a lot of these automations and then, a few months back, you're like, okay, well, now I need to make an enhancement. Why did I do that? What was this for? Right. So just putting descriptions on like all your resources, your elements, and if you're working in an org with multiple people, right? Like you're not in there thinking what they're thinking. So like if they're out or you're making an enhancement to something that you didn't build, you want to be able to easily figure out what's going on without having to look through like every single item. All right. And Christy noted that she uses RCS for record choice set. Thanks for sharing.
Nice.
So while we wait to see if we have any other questions come in, were there any gotchas that you came upon as you were building out your automation that you want to share?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, what I kind of said is that I was building out the flow and testing it out, and I kept getting essentially the last highest balance record was still checked as true. And I was like, how in the world? Why is this happening? And I was like up really late trying to figure it out. And then I slept for like 4 hours, and it came to me in a dream, truly, which that's when people say sleep on it. You should really sleep on it. And that's how I got that idea that I need to do the get records, get all the records first, and then filter and reloop it. Because I don't know, I just thought it would be easy just to be like, no, this is the highest balance, like check. And I didn't think I have to uncheck what's previously been checked. So that was definitely a gotcha for me.
Yeah, I've definitely been there where you're staring at the flow and you're like, why doesn't this work? It should work. And then you just have to like step away from it
Yeah.
and take a long walk, or like you said, you think about it in your dreams, and then you're like, yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I definitely have had issues where I've gotten the dreaded flow error on my personal org, which is always frustrating because you have no one else to be frustrated with. And I think in this particular case, most of mine were like really just iterating mostly what supported a good user experience. So, I built the original screen flow, that was great. I realized it didn't have reminders, so I added that on. I realized that blood pressure numbers will probably never make sense to me, and I needed to add color coding in. So I feel like it's kind of been this iterative process. on the slate of things that I want to probably extend this with is I noticed as I was testing in real life, I wouldn't take my blood pressure like 6 times in a single day, but then I was getting a bunch of notifications. So stealing Kenya's tool of making sure only one record is checked is something that I would do in the future to take this to the next level.
Great. All right. We have a question from Erica. Any favorite resources you refer to, like keep tabs on in regards to flows?
Oh.
I have a few. I would say I really like unofficialsf.com. While not an official resource, there's usually someone who will publish a flow, I guess, article anytime a new release comes out. So it's kind of nice to have just that more tailored focus and to hone in on it. And then it's really kind of something I use to then dig deeper into the release notes that come out. That's what I really like for new stuff personally.
For me, really at most, like Automate This for sure gives me really great ideas on what I could be doing. And also, like when I get stumped or I want to just learn a little bit new about something, like collection elements were completely new to me when I created this flow. And so, but other than that, I don't have a lot of them. But yeah, the Automate This, which is why I'm happy to be here.
Awesome.
I would say my last one too would be Automation Hour.
Mm-hmm.
It's a podcast that's community run. It was definitely one of the first tools that I used to really improve my flow skills, and not simply just the podcast or the webinar itself, but also even the individuals who created it tend to put out a lot of content about what they're building to help others. Really helped me um, really escalate my skill set a lot faster than I thought I could. I love that the recordings are always available to me, so I can either go and view something myself or direct people in the community or my team if there's an issue that we're trying to solve that seems like it has a session that was on point. It's a really great community-driven resource.
Yeah, I was a former co-host of Automation
Yep.
Hour. So you could, so shout out to Rakesh Gupta and Michelle Hansen, who are the current co-hosts of it. You can get more information by going to automationhour.com. So our next question comes from Christy. Mary, can you say again where you got the formula for redirecting to a new record on the toast? I know you said it, but I missed it.
Sure. So the formula for redirecting to the new record on a toast is actually on unofficialsf.com. With the blog post that comes out related to this, you'll see it in detail and be able to actually copy and paste it. But there will also be a resource link to that unofficial post that allows you to also find that as well.
So, after today's episode, we will be publishing in the next couple of days, so tomorrow or the following day, a specific post for Kenya and a specific post written by Mary that dives deeper into each solution that they shared. So, thanks, Christy. And we have one more question. Adil, how can I, as a new administrator, get hired up? Most jobs ask for experience. Oh,
Hmm.
I can take a stab at this one. I mean, I think that being able to solve problems in your dev org is a great way. It's not just good for people who already have their first Salesforce role. It's a great way to think through problems and a great way to frame that with a hiring team. I also would suggest looking in the community. In my early days, I built a lot of my flow and formula skills by looking at questions other people ask and trying to solve them on my own in my dev board. It may have been the same or potentially differently because, as we all know, there are typically multiple ways of solving problems with Salesforce than what was suggested to the person, but it really helped me think through the problem and craft solutions. And I think being able to demonstrate that type of foresight can only strengthen your candidacy.
Yeah. I would say, my first Salesforce role, I had no Salesforce experience. I wasn't even certified yet. And I used a lot of transferable experience and skills. So I left education and moved into an education nonprofit as a Salesforce admin. So using transferable skills to kind of pivot into Salesforce. And then the reason why I really recommend using Salesforce for personal use is because outside of Trailhead, it gives you real applicable ways in which you're utilizing the system. And that's another reason why I said, like, don't be afraid of flows, because I wish that I had built a flow before I got hired in my Salesforce admin role, so it can just demystify kind of some of the fears that are around automation. But being able to go in and build custom objects and make enhancements and changes as your ideas continue to grow, like, that's so much experience right there. And then maybe you already have the like theoretical or transferable experience in whatever role you're moving into as an admin.
Yeah, so definitely plus one to what Mary and Kenya said. I also did an episode of How I Solved It with Haley Teller, and in that episode, she shared how she had a personal dev org and she keeps track, like Diane keeps track of all her skills, jobs that she's applied for, but also where she's done presentations and things like that. And that just allows you, like, while you didn't have a previous job as a Salesforce admin, it says you've done this thing, you've built this thing, and you can bring it up during your interview and show the folks how you applied your Salesforce knowledge to building something. All right, so we have another question from Shay for Kenya. While having the same exact balance on two different records is unlikely, will the flow check both record boxes if they're the highest balance?
That is a great question. And I actually thought of that while I was going through it. And yes, well, no, actually, it won't, because in the collection filter element that I had, I only saved one record. So it asked you how many records do you want to keep, and I only selected one. So as the flow is now, no, it will not do that functionality. But I feel like if I personally came across it and I was like, oh, I do have two that are the same balance, I would just update the flow to include like two or three to keep in the collection filter. But currently, no, it does not. But I think it should, just in case.
Great. All right. Last call for questions. um, so how do you both keep up with flow enhancements? Well, we see if there's anybody else that wants to ask a question.
Sure.
You go ahead, Mary.
I was saying I'm lucky enough to work on a team. And so one of the things our team does is prepare, we do our own internal little mini release readiness. And we talk about the release notes, and most of us each look through Flow as well, but we talk about the enhancements and how they're going to impact us and what we're excited about. And we also talk about the stuff that's in beta, so what's coming. It's probably the most common way I start familiarizing myself with what's out there.
Same. I am lucky enough to work on a team. We have our own release readiness time that we have together. And then honestly, just like doing the work, we have to update a lot of flows, especially, moving from process builder and workflows to flows. Or we might have errors, and doing that and doing pair programming that we call it in our team is an easy way for us to learn new things, share knowledge, things like that. But definitely the release notes for sure.
So for those who don't know the term pair programming, can you just explain that for a little bit?
Absolutely. So what will happen in pair programming is in a certain cadence and frequency, you meet for at least 30 minutes with another team member, and you share like, oh, I'm working on this. Do you want to see it? Or I really need help thinking through this. Can you help me? And so you do that with all of your team members one-on-one at whatever frequency. If you have a team of 5, it's going to be every 4 weeks, and so on and so forth. But it's just been really great, informal but frequent learning opportunities.
Cool. All right. And we have one more question. Any tips you would give to a new admin?
Get involved in your community early. Um, Always make sure you understand the why you're being asked to do things. Those are probably my top 2 tips.
Definitely get involved in community. Again, I wouldn't have gotten my first role without community. And I would just stay knowledgeable. So I'm someone that really enjoys Trailhead. And before I moved into Salesforce, was on Trailhead every single day for hours at a time. And not necessarily just to study for the admin exam, but rather to know what is going on, about the system. So yeah, those would be my 2 pieces of advice.
So for folks who don't know how to get involved in the community, how can they go about that?
Great question. There are community groups and orgs which you can find. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mary or Jen, by logging into your Trailhead account, and there is a tab that's under community groups. And I would start with your local community group. Like there's a Jacksonville community group. And if in particular you want to go into nonprofits, for example, there's usually a nonprofit community group as well. But in this post-COVID, more remote learning world, I know a lot of different community groups still do things online. So say you want to be a part of Chicago, or you want to be a part of California, or wherever your needs are met, you can follow those groups and receive email notifications about what events they might have coming up.
Yeah, and
Yep.
also,
I,
go ahead, Mary.
I was going to say there's also the Trailhead communitygroups.com site, and that's a great place. You can, as Kenya said, there's a lot of groups that now are virtual. Some are virtual only, and there's filters in there by region and by virtual only. I would also say the community is made up of both community groups, thinking of it like a user group, and also just, I guess, maybe affinity groups might be a good way of describing it. So there are specific groups that focus on just conversations about automation or just conversations about release readiness. Those are other really great resources as well.
Yeah.
Yep, and our moderator posted to the chat the link to our Admin Trailblazers community group that you can have access to as well. All
I would
right,
also,
go
sorry, I
ahead.
would just highly recommend if you are able to attend a Dreamin' conference. There's so many of them in so many different locations that hopefully, like maybe you can just drive there, stay with some friends or things like that. But I know when you're first getting started out, it may be hard to access those.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. All right, and thanks for this Q&A. So we're going to continue on. So we're going to recap what you learned in today's episode. So from Kenya, you learned how to use Flow to manage paying off your debt, learn the differences between an assignment and update elements, and get more comfortable with collection elements. And from Mary, we learned how to use a screen flow to create blood pressure records, how to configure a custom toast prompt using code from Unofficial SF, and how to use Flow to send custom notifications and then redirect your users back to that record. So next month on November 1st, we're going to do a little bit of MuleSoft Composer and Flow with 2 muleys, Andrew Shanks and Mahesh Shenoy. So set the reminder on the live stream page now, and it's up already. And subscribe to the Salesforce Admins YouTube channel so that you're aware of new content, and we'll let you know when the new live stream page is up. And now it's your turn. So check out the URLs that you see on the screen. First, build a flow to track a hobby, activity, or a goal in your personal dev org. read the Flow Elements help article to see what's possible with Flow using that short URL that you see on the screen. And there's no better way to test your skills than to do a super badge. So earn the Flow Elements and Resources Specialist super badge using that short URL that you see on the screen. And you can get great content produced for you admins. Visit our website, admin.salesforce.com, to find the latest blogs, podcasts, and videos. Listen to the Salesforce Admins podcast, hosted by Mike Gerholt and Jillian Bruce, at all the places that you get your podcast content. And watch past episodes of Automate This via our playlist on the Salesforce Admins YouTube channel. And I want to give a quick thanks to our guests for today's episode, Kenya and Mary, and I hope to have you back in the future.
Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Jen.
Jen.
And thank you to all of you for joining us for this episode of Automate This. I look forward to seeing you at future sessions. And remember, the best way to be notified when we live stream is to set the reminder on the live stream page, and you'll get an email reminder the day of the event. We will also post upcoming sessions on our various social channels, so follow us on X at Salesforce Admins, LinkedIn, and the Trailblazer community.